Ah yes, General Motors, the mighty American juggernaut that helped define the golden era of muscle cars. 12 secret, savage, and nearly forgotten GM super muscle cars, the ones built with fire and fury, then shoved into the shadows. Some lived short lives, others were barely allowed to exist. But all of them are real, and all of them could destroy nearly anything in their path. The 1970 Chevrolet Biscayne 454 LS5 is one of the most obscure and potent muscle car sleepers ever conceived, a low-buck rocket ship that looked like it should be parked behind a government building, but had the heart of a fire-breathing Chevelle SS. In the United States, Chevrolet's full-size Biscayne was the absolute bottom of the barrel, the stripped-down fleet special, the car you bought when you needed the cheapest transportation with the most cubic feet. Taxi companies loved them. Police departments abused them. Regular buyers ignored them. But in Canada, where GM's options matrix often followed a different, sometimes more liberal path, something strange and glorious happened. Chevrolet of Canada allowed you to order a Biscayne with the LS5 454 cubic inch big block V8, rated at a stout 360 horsepower and 500 lb of torque, paired to a Muncie 4-speed manual transmission. This wasn't some parts counter mistake or special order fantasy. You could actually walk into a GM dealership and spec a bare-bones Biscayne with one of the biggest engines GM had ever made. No SS badges, no fancy trim, not even a radio in many cases. Just rubber floor mats, steel wheels, manual steering, and enough torque to rip asphalt out of the road. A literal full-size muscle car in plain clothes. To understand how strange this was, you have to consider what the Biscayne was supposed to be. It wasn't just entry-level, it was intentionally cheap. It was marketed toward utility and institutional buyers. You couldn't even get most Biscaynes with buckets or console shifts. Everything was vinyl, basic, and heavy-duty. In the US, if you wanted muscle from Chevy, you got an SS396 Chevelle or maybe a Camaro Z28. But in Canada, some enthusiasts figured out that you could build something more sinister. A car with all of the mechanical brawn of a Chevelle SS454, but none of the weight, cost, or flash. It's unclear exactly how many were built. Estimates suggest maybe a few dozen at most. Most were sold quietly, often through dealership back channels. There was no marketing campaign, no sales push, no muscle car posters. These were true sleepers, cars that looked like they were driven by janitors or traffic cops, but could stomp nearly anything at a stoplight. Picture a plain white post-spec sedan, maybe with a spotlight or black wall tires, showing its taillights to GTOs and 429 Mustangs. It was the kind of muscle car that didn't care about impressing anyone. It just was. And that LS5 engine? It was no joke. Though slightly detuned from the LS6 that made headlines in the Chevelle, which officially claimed 450 horsepower, the LS5 still delivered massive low-end grunt and a sound that could shake walls. In a lighter full-size sedan without ACE or insulation, the experience was even more visceral. Drivers reported that traction was non-existent below 40 mph unless you feathered the throttle. One Canadian owner recalled, "It didn't make noise, it made thunder." And nobody ever believed what it was until it was too late. Adding to the legend was how subtle these cars looked. Many were ordered with dog dish hubcaps, column shifts, and unpainted steelies. You could drive one into a muscle car show and nobody would notice it parked next to a bright orange Judge or Mach 1. That was the point. It wasn't about style or statements. It was about performance, purity, and brutal minimalism. Today, finding a genuine 1970 Biscayne LS5 is nearly impossible. Most were either wrecked, scrapped, or gutted long ago. The few survivors that exist are revered by collectors who know exactly what they're looking at. They represent a forgotten corner of the muscle car world, a place where the numbers mattered more than the nameplate and where anonymity was part of the charm. No stripes, no badges, no bragging, just 454 cubic inches of fury hiding beneath a badge that usually meant slow. In many ways, the LS5 Biscayne is the ultimate muscle car fantasy, the unassuming workhorse with supercar power. A full-size sedan that could obliterate a Corvette in a straight line, all while looking like a city maintenance vehicle. It was a unicorn born from Canadian loopholes and corporate indifference, a secret weapon for those in the know. And in a world obsessed with flashy muscle cars and high-profile nameplates, it reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous car in the lot is the one you never saw coming. The 1971 Chevrolet Kingswood Estate 454 wagon is one of those almost mythical machines that sounds like it shouldn't have existed, and yet somehow did. It was the kind of car a hot rod dad might have dreamed up after a long day at the dealership. Give me the biggest engine you've got, and make sure there's room for all 5 kids, the Beaumont, and a cooler full of Schlitz. What rolled off the assembly line was both an absurdity and a masterpiece. A full-size wood-grain-trimmed station wagon with the same big-block LS5 454 V8 used in Chevrolets and Corvettes, backed by a TH400 3-speed automatic and, if you check the right boxes, a limited-slip differential and heavy-duty suspension. In other words, it was a muscle car disguised as a grocery getter. The 1971 model year was the last gasp of unregulated muscle before insurance companies and emissions strangled everything. GM had just lifted its internal engine ban for midsize cars, but the full-size Chevrolets like the Kingswood were still quietly able to take just about anything from the big block parts bin. The LS5 454 was officially rated at 365 horsepower, lower than the 1970s 390 HP due to a switch to net horsepower ratings in 71. But the real story was torque. 465 uses of it, enough to tow a house or smoke the tires halfway through a school zone. The Kingswood estate itself was no small potato. It was a massive 5,000-plus pound, 9-passenger land yacht with a rear-facing third row, acres of fake wood on the sides, and a rear clamshell glide-away tailgate that slid down into the bumper like some kind of magic trick. It was one of the largest vehicles Chevrolet ever sold to the public, measuring over 225 inches long, longer than a modern Chevy Suburban. And into this great beast of American excess, you could slot the biggest, baddest engine GM had to offer at the time. Why? Because someone had to get the family to Yellowstone fast. Performance numbers were never officially tested because no one at the time considered the Kingswood 454 to be a performance car. But in a straight line, it could run with muscle cars of the day. Quarter-mile times in the low 15s or high 14s weren't unheard of, assuming the rear tires didn't evaporate in the process. Imagine lining up at a stoplight next to a GTO, only to get left behind by a 19-foot wagon filled with children and baseball gear. These wagons were rarely ordered this way. The LS5 454 was an expensive option, and the buyers most interested in performance were more likely to get a Chevelle SS, El Camino, or Corvette. A 454 Kingswood estate would have appealed to a very specific kind of buyer. Someone who needed the practicality of a station wagon, but who still wanted to dominate the left lane. It's estimated that only a few hundred were ever built with the LS5 engine, and many of those were used hard and forgotten. After all, who thought to save a station wagon? Today's surviving examples are vanishingly rare. Most were crushed, junked, or rusted into oblivion. A handful may remain, tucked away in barns, or handed down through families who had no idea what they were sitting on. Occasionally, one will appear at auction, where muscle car collectors stare in awe and confusion. Is it a muscle car? Is it a family car? Is it both? One owner of a restored 454 Kingswood once said, "It's the only car I've owned that could haul drywall in the morning and scare Mustangs at night." That about sums it up. The Kingswood 454 isn't just rare, it's wonderfully absurd. It embodies the very spirit of early 70s American car culture. The bigger, the brasher, the better. It was a time when car companies asked, why not, instead of why? And in that one brief moment, before gas lines, before emissions controls, before the downsizing era hit, Chevrolet built a family car that could outrun your neighbor's Camaro. Today, the Kingswood 454 is less a car and more a piece of folklore. A unicorn with wood grain sides, a tire-frying family truckster, a muscle wagon that shouldn't have existed and never will again. The 1989 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix ASC McLaren is one of those rare anomalies in automotive history. a fever dream from the late 80s where Pontiac, ASC, American Sunroof Company, and McLaren, yes, that McLaren, though the American offshoot, teamed up to build what can only be described as a tech-laden, turbocharged rocket disguised as a front-wheel drive personal luxury coupe. On paper, it sounds like science fiction. In execution, it was ahead of its time, underappreciated in its moment, and now almost completely forgotten. Only 750 of these cars were ever made, and they all left the factory dripping in late 80s excess. The Turbo Grand Prix was based on the already sleek W-body Grand Prix coupe, but Pontiac wasn't satisfied with style alone. So they handed the car off to ASC McLaren to turn it into something wild. The result was a 3.1-liter V6 with a Garrett T25 turbocharger and water-cooled intercooler system, pushing out a then impressive 205 horsepower and 225 buffety of torque. In a time when the base Corvette C4 had just 245 HP and weighed more, this turbocharged front driver could run the quarter mile in under 15 seconds, often beating the Vette in real-world street drags. But straight-line speed was only half the story. Inside the cabin, the Turbo Grand Prix looked like something out of RoboCop. It featured a fighter jet-style heads-up display projected onto the windshield, a touchscreen CRT interface, marketed as the VIS, or Vehicle Information System, with controls for climate, stereo, trip functions, and diagnostics, and brace yourself, a built-in digital navigation system. In 1980, it was rudimentary by today's standards, sure, but nothing else on the road, not even German luxury sedans, had anything like it. It looked and felt like the dashboard of a spaceship. And then there was the upholstery. Nearly every single Turbo Grand Prix came with bright red leather bucket seats, bolstered like a sports car and drenched in 80s flair. The interior was bold, unapologetic, and completely unhinged. Critics at the time didn't know what to make of it. Some called it excessive. Others saw it as a sign of Pontiac's bold ambition. Either way, there was no mistaking it for anything else. The suspension was tuned for grand touring rather than canyon carving, but the car handled surprisingly well for a front-wheel drive coupe of the era. It featured upgraded struts, stiffer springs, quicker steering, and ABS-equipped four-wheel disc brakes. It rode firmly but with control and offered the kind of long-distance comfort that fit its personal luxury mission. So why didn't it catch on? For one, the price. This wasn't a cheap Grand Prix. The Turbo ASC McLaren package pushed it into the $30,000 range, more than a Mustang GT and knocking on the door of BMW money. For that kind of cash, buyers expected rear-wheel drive and prestige, not a turbo V6 powering the front wheels from a brand associated with Firebirds and plastic body cladding. Also, Pontiac's brand cachet was declining by the end of the decade, and a few years later, this kind of car would be completely out of step with the grunge-era minimalism of the 1990s. Most buyers opted for the more affordable Grand Prix SE or GT trims, leaving the Turbo McLaren edition to languish in obscurity. After 1989, it vanished. Pontiac never built another car like it again. Today, it's an obscure footnote, a brilliant but baffling experiment from a time when GM briefly let its divisions go wild. Spotting one in the wild is nearly impossible. Most have been junked, crushed, or left to rot in the corners of Midwestern barns. If you find one intact, especially in its signature red-on-white or red-on-black combo, you've found one of the most radical and misunderstood cars GM ever built. As one former owner put it, it was the only car I ever drove that made people ask, "What is that?" right before I blew their doors off. The 1989 Pontiac Turbo Grand Prix ASE McLaren wasn't just a car, it was a rolling time capsule of late 80s futurism, a perfect storm of technology, performance, and design audacity that couldn't have happened in any other era. And perhaps that's why it didn't last. It was too far ahead for its time, too weird for the mainstream, and too cool to be remembered. The 1970 Oldsmobile Rally 350 was one of the most unconventional muscle cars of its time, a blazing banana-colored protest against the insurance crackdown that was already choking Detroit's high-horsepower dream. Born from necessity but executed with flair, the Rally 350 was Oldsmobile's clever attempt to offer muscle car style and swagger without the crushing premiums that came with big blocks and GTO badges. And while many dismissed it as a gimmick, today it stands tall as one of the boldest and rarest statements the muscle car era ever made. By 1970, insurance companies were targeting muscle cars with a vengeance. High displacement, high horsepower, dual carburetors. These were the red flags that sent monthly premiums through the roof, especially for young buyers. Oldsmobile engineers, sensing the tide turning, tried to game the system. What if you offered a factory hot rod that looked like a 442, sounded like a 442, but didn't carry the insurance-weighted engine codes or nameplate? Enter the Rally 350, a package built on the Cutlass S Coupe and also available on the F85 and Cutlass Holiday Hardtop. Instead of a big 455 V8, it came with a high-compression 350 cubic inch rocket V8 producing 310 horsepower and 390 lb-ft of torque. It was paired with either a 3-speed manual, 4-speed manual, or TA 350 automatic. With the right gearing, it could do the quarter mile in the low 15s. Not earth-shattering, but quick for a small block intermediate with a curb weight north of 3,600 pounds. But performance wasn't the Rally 350's only message. Visually, it shouted, painted in retina-searing Sebring yellow from nose to tail, including the urethane front and rear bumpers, mirrors, wheels, and even the rear wing. The Rally 350 was a rolling billboard for defiance. Black and orange side stripes, hood stripes, Rally 350 callouts, and the functional twin-scooped W25 fiberglass hood, borrowed from the 442, made it look like a Hot Wheels car come to life. Chrome was out, urethane and paint-match components were in. Even the bumpers were a big deal. The front, a molded Endura piece similar to what Pontiac used on the GTO Judge, gave the car a modern, streamlined look. It was as if Oldsmobile wanted this car to look like the future of performance. Inside, things were more modest. Cutlass trim with bucket seats, optional floor console, and typical old switchgear. But that was the point. This was a car aimed at buyers who wanted the image without the costs. It was supposed to be attainable muscle for the everyman, and yet it didn't sell. Only 3,547 Rally 350s were ever built. Dealers didn't know how to market them. Buyers didn't understand them. Critics mocked the yellow paint and considered the car a joke. Too loud in appearance, too mild in performance. One period reviewer called it a muscle car for guys whose moms wouldn't let them have one. Another said, it looked like a school bus and drove like a Cutlass with asthma. But hindsight, as always, brings clarity. Today, the Rally 350 is a cult classic. Its outrageous styling, low production numbers, and one-year-only status make it one of the most collectible Oldsmobiles of the era. Survivors are rare and complete restorations are difficult due to the number of unique painted parts. But those who own them know the Rally 350 was never meant to be subtle. It was a time capsule of an industry trying to adapt to a changing world without losing its sense of fun. It's the muscle car equivalent of a defiant grin, still smiling in bright yellow long after the rest of the class has gone gray. As one modern collector put it, you don't drive a Rally 350 to blend in. You drive it because it's the loudest, weirdest middle finger to conformity Oldsmobile ever built. The 1976 Buick Century Free Spirit Pace Car Edition stands as one of the most peculiar and fascinating oddities in the annals of automotive history. Born in an era where the muscle car culture was beginning to fade, the Free Spirit was Buick's attempt to bridge the gap between the high-performance world of the Indianapolis 500 and the ever-changing, post-oil crisis American automotive landscape. This was not a car that was built for raw performance or even for conventional luxury. Instead, it was an extravagant expression of the mid-70s. Bold, bright, and unapologetically patriotic in a way that only an American automaker could pull off. The story of the Free Spirit begins with Buick's role as the official pace car for the 1976 Indianapolis 500. This was a time when the racing world was still filled with the thunderous roar of muscle cars and the raw power of high-performance engines. but the American car market was undergoing significant shifts. The fuel crises of the previous decade had left their mark, and American automakers were scrambling to create smaller, more fuel-efficient cars that could navigate the demands of a more conservative market. This, however, didn't stop Buick from making an audacious move. They took their Century, a mid-size car that had already gained a reputation for being a solid, if somewhat uninspiring performer, and transformed it into a flamboyant, attention-grabbing tribute to the pace car culture. What emerged was the Free Spirit Pace Car Edition, a vehicle that defied all logic, blending American patriotism, racetrack bravado, and an excess of style into one strange package. The exterior of the Free Spirit was an explosion of red, white, and blue, an automotive declaration of exuberance and confidence. The bright, bold color scheme included patriotic stripes that wrapped around the car like a winding ribbon of freedom, and the chrome accents added a touch of classic 70s luxury. For added flair, Buick slapped on spoilers at both ends, accentuating the car's sporty vibe, and included a set of 5.7-inch rally wheels that seemed designed to scream, "Look at me," wherever the car went. The hood and sides featured Indy 500 pace car badges, proudly announcing its affiliation with one of the most prestigious races in America. But despite these bold exterior upgrades, the car's styling wasn't necessarily aligned with the tastes of the time. While some might have seen it as an homage to the world of racing, others viewed it as an awkward, misguided attempt to be more than what the Century really was. Under the hood, the Free Spirit was powered by a 350 cubic inch V8 engine, which was paired with a TH350 automatic transmission. The 350 V8 was a workhorse engine for the era, delivering adequate power and torque for cruising and light acceleration. However, it wasn't the high-performance powerhouse one might expect from a car bearing the pace car name. It wasn't fast, nor did it have the muscle to truly compete with the more powerful machines of its time, like the Pontiac Trans Am or the Chevy Camaro. But what the Free Spirit lacked in raw speed, it made up for in comfort. The car had a smooth, cushioned ride designed to appeal to buyers who were looking for something more refined than the typical muscle car. However, in a way that made the Free Spirit feel like a car without a clear identity. It was neither a true muscle car nor a traditional luxury vehicle. Despite its striking design and bold ambition, the Free Spirit's reception was lukewarm, even among Buick buyers. It was caught in the middle of two conflicting worlds: the muscle car culture that had dominated the previous decade, and the new era of smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. While its exterior screamed performance, its interior and driving experience didn't quite live up to those promises. The Free Spirit was never going to win any races or steal the spotlight from more established performance models, but it did stand out for its audacity and visual flair. The fact that it was built in limited numbers, only about 1/300 units, made it even more of a rare curiosity in the years that followed. Despite its rarity and flamboyant nature, the Free Spirit quickly fell into obscurity after its brief moment in the spotlight. The 90s were a time of rapid change in the automotive world, and the market for big, brash cars with bold graphics was shrinking fast. Many of the Free Spirits were lost to the ravages of time, some destroyed in accidents, others rusted away in junkyards. Its niche appeal ensured that most buyers had no interest in owning a car that couldn't live up to the power and performance of the vehicles it tried to emulate. The Free Spirit, for all its uniqueness, was doomed to fade into the background of automotive history. Today, the 1976 Buick Century Free Spirit Pace Car Edition is something of a legend among car collectors and enthusiasts, but it remains largely forgotten by the general public. The 1978 Chevrolet Chevette 2.3 HS is perhaps one of the most perplexing yet fascinating muscle cars to have ever graced the South American automotive scene. For most of the world, the Chevrolet Chevette was a simple, modest hatchback, a compact economy car built to appeal to budget-conscious buyers. In the US, it was synonymous with basic transportation, a far cry from anything that could be associated with performance or excitement. But in Brazil, GM saw an opportunity to offer something truly unique, transforming the Chevette into a surprisingly capable and agile performance car for the Latin American market. This special version of the Chevette, known as the 2.3 HS, was not your average city commuter. Under the hood, it was powered by a 2.3-liter Opel DOHC double overhead cam engine, an engine that, at the time, was relatively sophisticated and offered impressive power for such a small, lightweight car. Mated to a 5-speed manual transmission and equipped with a limited slip differential, the Chevette 2.3 HS had the mechanical components to back up its sporty aspirations. It wasn't just about power, though. This version of the Chevette was built to handle. The rear-wheel drive layout, something relatively rare in compact cars, gave it a more balanced, engaging driving experience than most of its front-wheel drive contemporaries. Think of it as a baby Camaro, a true pocket rocket for South America, where performance cars were often seen as the domain of high-end imported machinery. The 2.3 HS delivered an unexpected thrill, especially for enthusiasts in a region where such cars were few and far between. With a sleek, muscular stance, flared wheel arches, and a no-nonsense design, it had an unmistakable performance aura, further bolstered by its sporty suspension setup. Inside, the Chevette 2.3 HS was far more utilitarian than luxurious. But it didn't matter. The focus was always on the drive, not the creature comforts. Unfortunately, the Chevette 2.3 HS never had the chance to make its mark on the global stage, and its short production run meant that only a small number were ever made. The combination of the high-performance engine and rear-wheel drive layout, while exhilarating, also made the car more prone to rust and wear than its more pedestrian counterparts. In a country like Brazil, where climate and road conditions were less forgiving, many of these Chevettes met an early demise. They rusted away quickly, leaving only a few survivors. Today, finding a Chevette 2.3 HS is like uncovering a rare gem in the world of classic cars. Its obscurity, combined with the fact that it was ahead of its time, has earned it a cult following among Brazilian car enthusiasts and collectors. In many ways, the 1978 Chevrolet Chevette 2.3 HS can be seen as an early precursor to the performance hatchbacks that would later dominate the global market in the 1980s and beyond. It demonstrated that a small, unassuming car could pack a punch if engineered with the right performance parts and a proper attention to handling. The fact that it was built by GM, a company more famous for its larger, more luxurious models, adds to the mystique of this forgotten gem. If you were to drive one today, you would feel like you were behind the wheel of a little-known secret. The combination of the agile handling, rear-wheel drive dynamics, and spirited engine would make it clear that the Chevette 2.3 HS was not just a compact hatchback. It was a small car with big ambitions, a high-performance model that never got the recognition it deserved outside of Brazil. For collectors and enthusiasts, it's a testament to a time when the automotive world was full of unexpected surprises, like a muscle car hiding in the body of a hatchback. If you ever come across one, hold on to it tightly. It's not just a piece of automotive history, it's a relic of a time when even the most unlikely cars could deliver thrills. The 1973 Chevrolet Laguna Type S3 454 represents a fascinating chapter in American automotive history, where the line between race car and street car was blurred and the performance car was redefined. Its creation was not driven by market trends or consumer demand, but by the needs of NASCAR. And that racing heritage makes the Laguna S3 a special, albeit misunderstood, piece of machinery. The Laguna was not your typical muscle car of the era. It didn't have the same aggressive stance or familiar styling that defined the Chevelle SS or the Pontiac GTO. Instead, Chevrolet made bold choices, pushing the boundaries of aerodynamics and design in a way that most car enthusiasts were not ready for. The long, sloping nose, which was specifically designed to reduce drag and increase high-speed stability, set the Laguna apart from its contemporaries. It was clear that Chevrolet had NASCAR in mind when they designed this vehicle. The aerodynamic front end wasn't just for show, it had a purpose, and that purpose was to improve the car's performance on the track. In fact, this design tweak made the Laguna more stable and better suited for the NASCAR circuit than the more famous Chevelle SS. But this very design, ahead of its time in many ways, was part of what led to the Laguna's underappreciation in the marketplace. The Laguna S3 Type 454's secret weapon was its 454 LS4 big block V8 engine. This powerhouse was capable of producing 270 horsepower, and an astounding 500 lb of torque, figures that were more than capable of propelling this full-size muscle car with blistering acceleration and immense power. But the Laguna wasn't just about raw muscle. The addition of the rear sway bars, already standard on the big block models, combined with a suspension system designed for both everyday road use and the high demands of racing, allowed the Laguna to handle exceptionally well for a car of its size. Its powertrain was matched with a 4-speed manual transmission that offered an exhilarating driving experience, making the Laguna a car not just built to go fast, but to be driven hard. Yet despite all of its engineering excellence, the Laguna Type S3 454 didn't catch the public's eye. At the time, the muscle car era was already facing the effects of rising insurance premiums, increased fuel prices, and a growing societal focus on fuel efficiency. Add to that the shifting tastes of the American consumer, which were now leaning towards more compact, efficient, and family-friendly vehicles, and the Laguna's large frame, aggressive performance, and unconventional styling seemed like an out-of-touch relic. Chevrolet may have been thinking about racing, but the average consumer wasn't looking for a race car for the streets. The Laguna's appeal was too niche, its design too forward-thinking, and the public's appetite for high-performance cars had already begun to fade. The Laguna S3 was further overshadowed by the popularity of the Chevelle SS, which offered a more traditional muscle car experience with its brawny, recognizable design. The Laguna, with its unique sloping front end and streamlined shape, seemed like a car for a specific kind of buyer. A buyer who wanted something different, something more refined and performance-oriented. However, in a marketplace filled with more classic and brash muscle cars, the Laguna's styling and performance features went largely unnoticed. Despite the Laguna S3's obvious merits, Chevrolet's marketing didn't seem to know what to do with it. The car wasn't as flashy or as instantly recognizable as the Camaro or Chevelle, and with limited advertising and an underappreciated model, the Laguna failed to capture the attention of the masses. The public's reluctance to embrace the Laguna wasn't due to a lack of quality or performance. It was simply a matter of bad timing. The market had moved on to other priorities, and the Laguna, despite being a NASCAR-built performance car with a great engine and impressive handling, was left behind. What makes the Laguna S3 454 even more fascinating is its NASCAR connection. The car was not just a street version of a race car, it was designed to be competitive on the track. Richard Petty, one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history, raced the Laguna in the 1973 season. His participation gave the Laguna an undeniable authenticity and a genuine racing pedigree. Despite its racing success, however, the Laguna never gained the recognition or popularity it deserved in the civilian world. The few NASCAR variants built for the public were mostly forgotten by the masses, and only a small group of enthusiasts continued to appreciate its racing heritage. Today, the Laguna S3 454 is one of the rarest and most sought-after muscle cars from the early 70s. Fewer than 1,000 of these cars were produced, and only a fraction of those are equipped with the big block 454 engine. Most of the cars have been destroyed, neglected, or lost to the ravages of time. The 1986 Pontiac Grand Prix 2+2 Era Coupe is a fascinating and rather peculiar piece of automotive history, born out of necessity for racing, but ultimately finding itself lost in the shuffle of production cars that never quite connected with the mainstream. In a way, it epitomized Pontiac's willingness to innovate, yet also their tendency to deliver something that, while radical in its time, was destined for obscurity. The story behind the Grand Prix 2+2 starts with the 1980s NASCAR circuit. Racing rules at the time were evolving, and manufacturers needed to adapt their cars for high-speed racing. The Grand Prix 2+2, alongside its close relative, the Chevrolet Monte Carlo Aero Coupe, was designed to meet new NASCAR specifications for aerodynamics and high-speed stability. The aerodynamic modifications, particularly the iconic bubble-back rear window and the altered roofline, were intended to reduce drag and improve downforce, making the car more stable at high speeds, an absolute necessity in the high-stakes world of NASCAR. The bubble-back glass, a distinctive and odd feature, gave the car a unique profile and certainly made it stand out. Underneath all that race-inspired bodywork, however, the Grand Prix 2+2 was less of a powerhouse than its visual cues might suggest. While the body was primed for speed, the engine powering this machine was a relatively modest 305 cubic inch V8, rated at 150 horsepower, far from the robust engine setups of its competitors or what enthusiasts were expecting from a performance-oriented vehicle. It wasn't a car built for raw power. It was a car designed for aerodynamic efficiency, and its engine was simply meant to keep up with the vehicle's sleek lines. Pontiac's decision to produce the Grand Prix 2+2 was part of a larger strategy to meet the demands of NASCAR. But in doing so, the company found itself producing a car that didn't quite find a home with regular consumers. With only 1,025 units produced, the Grand Prix 2+2 was a limited edition that would always be seen as more of a specialty item than a mainstream product. The car was too niche for the average consumer who might have been looking for a typical muscle car or a more refined version of a Grand Prix. It was a unique oddity, a machine with a specific function, but one that didn't quite work in the civilian world. And while the aerodynamics were brilliant for racing, they weren't particularly stylish in the eyes of many. The bubble back window, while functional, was a strange look for a production car. It wasn't exactly graceful, and it seemed almost out of place on a road car designed for everyday driving. The car's silhouette, while purpose-driven, didn't resonate with consumers who were drawn to the more traditional, muscular designs of other Pontiac models. But in the world of NASCAR, it made sense. After all, the Grand Prix 2+2's design was aimed at high-speed stability, not street appeal. Pontiac's Grand Prix 2+2 also faced another hurdle. It was too unusual for many car buyers. In the mid-'80s, the performance market was filled with cars that combined powerful engines with aggressive styling. The 305 V8 engine in the Grand Prix 2+2 didn't have the firepower to compete with the more powerful performance cars of the era, and the car's oddball appearance didn't help it win over those who were looking for a more conventional muscle car. Plus, with only 1,225 cars built, it never gained enough presence to develop a lasting cult following like other unique models of the era. In the end, the Grand Prix 2+2 Aero Coupe was a vehicle built to meet a specific need, a race car for the street that, for all its NASCAR-inspired changes, couldn't quite reach the performance heights that the public was expecting. Despite its advanced aerodynamic design, it wasn't able to make much of an impact in the marketplace. The weak engine, coupled with its odd design, made it an outlier in Pontiac's lineup and a footnote in muscle car history. Today, the Grand Prix 2+2 Aero Coupe is a rare collector's item, a fascinating example of a car that was built to race but never quite fit in with the cars people were buying. It represents an interesting moment when car manufacturers were trying to merge race technology with street cars, but not always with the success they had hoped for. The limited production numbers and its strange styling mean it is largely forgotten by the mainstream car-buying public. But for enthusiasts and collectors, the Grand Prix 2+2 is a unique relic, a car born of necessity, gone before it had a chance to be fully appreciated. The 1969 Beaumont SD396, a muscle car born from the Canadian division of General Motors, is one of the most elusive and enigmatic performance machines of its era. Built by GM Canada, the Beaumont was a near clone of the American Chevrolet Chevette, but with a distinctive Canadian twist, featuring unique grille designs and badges that set it apart from its American counterparts. While many in the United States were captivated by the Chevelle SS, the Beaumont remained a hidden gem, a forgotten beast of the North that left its mark primarily in the Canadian market. But for those who were in the know, the Beaumont SD396 was an absolute powerhouse, one of the rarest and most potent muscle cars of the late 60s. At the heart of the Beaumont SD396 was the formidable L78 396 cubic inch V8, the same engine that powered the Chevelle SS 396. This engine was one of the most coveted performance power plants of the muscle car era, churning out an impressive 375 horsepower. The L78 was known for its brutal acceleration, its thunderous exhaust note, and its ability to hold its own against the best muscle cars of the time. The engine was a masterpiece of engineering, offering the perfect balance of power and torque to push the Beaumont SD396 down the quarter mile in impressive times, typically running in the low 14-second range, a mark that was competitive even by the standards of the day. The SD396 was not just about raw power, it also had the suspension and handling to match. Equipped with the F41 performance suspension, the Beaumont was designed to remain stable and agile during high-speed runs and aggressive cornering. This was crucial for a car that, despite its heavy muscle, needed to feel composed and capable on the road. The Muncie 4-speed manual transmission was the perfect pairing for the L78 V8, giving drivers full control over the car's power and offering the kind of driving experience that was at the heart of what made muscle cars so exciting. The gear ratios were designed for performance, and the 4-speed allowed drivers to make the most out of the engine's considerable output. But the real allure of the Beaumont SD396 lies in its rarity. This car was never intended to be a mainstream product. It was a special order muscle car built for a select group of enthusiasts in Canada. Only a handful of these SD396 models were produced, and the car quickly became a shadow in the muscle car scene. While its American counterparts like the Chevrolet SS and the Pontiac GTO received all the attention, the Beaumont flew under the radar, offering the same level of performance but with a much smaller production run. Even today, it is difficult to find a Beaumont SD396 in the wild, and fewer still are in the condition that collectors and enthusiasts crave. To most Americans, the Beaumont was a foreign mystery, a name they might have heard in passing but never fully appreciated. While GM focused on promoting the Chevrolet SS and other American muscle cars, the Beaumont SD396 was left to simmer quietly in Canada, where it developed a loyal but small following. For Canadians, however, the SD396 was a car that delivered the raw power and street credibility of the Chevrolet SS, but with a little bit of uniqueness that made it their own. Its understated presence in the market only added to its appeal. The car had the same unmistakable muscle car DNA as the Chevrolet SM, the aggressive stance, the beefy V8 engine, and the unmistakable rumble of American muscle. But it was different. It was rare, and that rarity made it an object of desire for those who sought something that wasn't seen at every car show or muscle car event. In an era where limited production models were starting to gain more attention, the Beaumont SD396 was one of the best-kept secrets of the muscle car world, and that secret has only grown in stature with time. Today, the 1969 Beaumont SD396 is not just a forgotten relic. It is a symbol of the kind of muscle car that never got its due. It represents a time when GM was still pushing the envelope, when they were building cars that could hang with the best of the performance crowd, but doing so in a way that kept them somewhat in the shadows. The SD396 remains a fascinating piece of automotive history, a car that was equal to, if not better than, many of its American contemporaries, but whose legacy was overshadowed by the sheer volume of other iconic muscle cars from the era. For collectors and enthusiasts, owning a Beaumont SD396 is more than just having a rare muscle car. It's about owning a piece of history that represents the underappreciated and forgotten aspects of muscle car culture. It's a vehicle that whispers of a time when GM was willing to take risks and offer performance with a sense of uniqueness. It's a car that has become a treasure, a near mythical find for those who are lucky enough to encounter one. The 1975 Hurst Olds W30 455 stands as a poignant symbol of the end of an era, a final hurrah for Oldsmobile's muscle car legacy as the 1970s wound down. This car was a last-ditch attempt to keep the spirit of performance alive in a time when muscle cars were being squeezed by stricter emission standards, rising insurance rates, and shifting consumer preferences. But what made the W30 so special wasn't just its power or styling. It was the sheer audacity of fitting a 455 cubic inch big block V8 into a colonnade body that was anything but sporty. By 1975, the muscle car era was quickly coming to a close. The fuel crisis, stricter emissions regulations, and the onset of the 70s energy consciousness had reshaped the American automotive landscape. Gone were the days of freewheeling V8s and highway-crushing horsepower. Yet Oldsmobile, ever determined to go out with a bang, chose to place the mighty 455 cubic inch engine in the W30 one of the last Oldsmobiles to ever wear this iconic badge. The engine, with its formidable 455 cubic inch capacity, produced an estimated 215 horsepower. Far less than the numbers seen in the muscle car's heyday, but still enough to keep the legacy of power alive. The 455 engine provided healthy torque, a nod to the car's muscle car roots, even as the performance era slowed down. What made the 1975 W30 even more remarkable was the fact that it was not built on a traditional, lightweight muscle car platform. Instead, the W30 was housed in a colonnade coupe, a large, heavy-bodied car more akin to a luxury cruiser than the nimble, road-eating muscle cars of yore. Despite its weight, the W30 managed to offer the kind of power delivery that defined Oldsmobile's performance history, though it was clear that this was a different breed of muscle car, a heavier, more refined version, yet still carrying the spirit of the W30 badge. The styling of the 1975 W30 was unmistakable, even if somewhat subdued by the standards of the earlier muscle car years. The car was decked out in bold Hurst Olds colors, typically finished in either a bright white or a striking black with gold striping. The dual snorkel hood, a hallmark of the Hurst Olds lineage, helped give the car a performance-oriented look, though it was more about appearance than actual functional improvement in performance at this point. The copious amount of Hurst badging throughout the car added to the aura of exclusivity, making it clear that this was something special, even if it wasn't packing the kind of punch that its predecessors had. One of the most iconic features of the W30 was its distinctive Hurst shifter, a hallmark of Oldsmobile's performance models. The shifter was symbolic of the brand's performance attitude, offering that tactile connection between driver and machine. Inside, the interior offered a slightly more luxurious feel than its muscle car siblings, with high-quality materials and touches like leather trim, giving the car an air of sophistication that set it apart from the more utilitarian muscle machines of the time. But the W30 was more than just about its performance or styling. It represented the last stand of a breed of cars that defined the American muscle car culture, and its production numbers reflected that sense of dwindling demand. Only about 20,500 of these cars were made, making the 1975 Hurst Olds W30 a rare and special breed. While it may not have been as powerful or as fast as its predecessors, it carried the last remnants of the spirit that had given birth to the muscle car craze in the first place. The W30's legacy is bittersweet. It arrived too late to reignite the fire of the golden age of muscle cars. Yet it was a fitting tribute to the power and glory that Oldsmobile had once offered. As the decade wore on and muscle cars began to fade into the annals of automotive history, the Hurst Olds W30 455 remained one of the last truly bold attempts to capture the essence of what muscle cars once represented. Today, the 1975 Hurst Olds W30 is considered a collectible oddity, a unique chapter in the history of Oldsmobile and American muscle cars. Its rarity, distinctive styling, and historical significance make it a sought-after piece for muscle car enthusiasts, even though it never reached the level of fame enjoyed by earlier muscle cars. It serves as a reminder that while the muscle car era was dying, there were still those who were willing to push against the tide. One final time. The 1971 GMC Sprint SP454 LS5 is one of the automotive world's most secretive and overlooked muscle cars. While many enthusiasts are familiar with the Chevrolet El Camino, its GMC counterpart, the Sprint, remained largely under the radar, overshadowed by more famous muscle cars of the era. But hidden within the unassuming shell of this pickup-turned-muscle car was a potent force that few ever got to experience. GMC's Sprint, especially when equipped with the SP package and the legendary LS5 454 big block V8, represented one of the most elusive and rare muscle cars of the 1970s, a badge-engineered, high-performance sleeper. To understand the rarity and significance of the 1971 GMC Sprint SP454, it's essential to first appreciate the history behind the GMC Sprint. Launched in 1971, the Sprint was GMC's answer to the wildly popular El Camino, offering a hybrid design that merged the utility of a pickup with the performance of a muscle car. Unlike the El Camino, which was more well-known, the Sprint was somewhat of a niche offering, available only through GMC dealerships, and often overlooked in favor of its Chevrolet counterpart. Yet for those in the know, the Sprint offered a performance-oriented driving experience that was at home alongside the likes of the Chevelle SS and other muscle cars of the time. But the true gem of the Sprint lineup was the LS5 454 engine, which could be optioned in the SP package. The LS5 was a 454 cubic inch big block V8 that cranked out 365 horsepower, which, while not as potent as some of the higher output big blocks of the day, still offered impressive torque and a driving experience that was nothing short of exhilarating. The LS5 engine was a favorite in cars like the Chevelle SS 454 and the Corvette, but when it was dropped into the more utilitarian Sprint pickup, it created a performance vehicle that was entirely unexpected. Equipped with the LS5, the Sprint SP454 was capable of running with the best of them, offering blistering straight-line performance and a throaty exhaust note that matched its muscle car pedigree. It could outpace most contemporary muscle cars on the quarter mile, despite the fact that it wasn't initially recognized as a performance powerhouse. The combination of a big block engine, relatively lightweight pickup design, and rear-wheel drive made the Sprint SP454 a potent muscle car that could hold its own against anything on the road, from the Chevelle SS to the Pontiac GTO. The rarity of the 1971 GMC Sprint SP454 is another aspect that adds to its allure. While the Chevrolet El Camino was a mainstream success, the Sprint remained a rare commodity. Of those, only a handful were equipped with the LS5 454 engine, making it one of the rarest muscle cars ever produced by General Motors. Estimates vary, but it's believed that only 25 to 50 of these LS5-powered Sprint SPs were ever built, and very few remain today. Most were likely used as everyday work vehicles or lost to the ravages of time, making any surviving examples incredibly valuable to collectors and muscle car enthusiasts. The Sprint SP454's low production numbers, coupled with its unique place in automotive history, mean that it remains one of the most underappreciated muscle cars of the era. It's a car that many enthusiasts never even knew existed, and even fewer have had the chance to experience. It's one of those hidden gems that makes muscle car history so intriguing, as it was built to go toe-to-toe with the best of the best, yet was often relegated to the shadows, overlooked by mainstream muscle car culture. The styling of the 1971 GMC Sprint SP454 was relatively straightforward, following the design language of the El Camino with its elongated bed and cab, but with the distinctive GMC front grille and badges. It wasn't as flamboyant as some of the flashier muscle cars of the time, but that was part of its charm. The subtlety of the Sprint's appearance only added to the sleeper effect, as it looked far more like a workaday vehicle than a powerhouse muscle car. The true performance lay under the hood and in the way it felt on the road, fast, aggressive, and unapologetically raw. Inside, the Sprint SP454 offered the no-frills interior typical of many muscle cars of the era. The seats were simple yet comfortable, the dashboard was functional, and the driving experience was all about performance rather than luxury. But the real magic of the Sprint was in how it felt to drive, the engine's rumble, the feel of the 4-speed manual transmission, and the sheer thrill of pushing a pickup truck with muscle car credentials to its limits. Today, the 1971 GMC Sprint SP454 is one of the most coveted and least known muscle cars in existence. Its rarity, unique status as a GMC offering, and the fact that it was part of a brief moment in automotive history when General Motors divisions were experimenting with performance in unexpected places have made it a true collector's item. The 1984 Oldsmobile Hurst Olds is one of those rare cars that seems to defy both time and expectations. Part of the G-Body family, a platform that produced some of the most iconic American cars of the 1980s, the Hurst Olds stood out for its strikingly unique and often misunderstood design. The crowning feature of this particular model was the lightning rod shifter system, a bold and experimental attempt to offer performance enthusiasts an unparalleled level of manual control over their vehicle's transmission. On the surface, the 1984 Hurst Olds appeared to be a relatively conventional luxury muscle coupe. With its formal, boxy profile and smooth upscale lines, it was a car that wouldn't raise too many eyebrows at first glance. But as soon as you slid into the driver's seat, the Hurst Olds revealed its true nature. The moment you looked at the console, you'd see something utterly bizarre. 3 shifters arranged side by side, as though you had mistakenly stepped into a dragster. The triple shifter setup was the signature feature of the Hurst Olds. Called lightning rods, these shifters allowed drivers to manually control the gears of the TH200 4R automatic transmission, providing a level of performance control that was well ahead of its time. The system was a modified automatic transmission that allowed for an unusual level of gear shifting precision, giving the driver more control over power delivery than the average automatic. Each shifter was connected to a different function of the transmission, one for low gear, another for second gear, and the final one for overdrive. The idea behind this setup was to allow the driver to simulate a manual transmission experience, delivering quicker, more responsive shifting, especially when racing or spirited driving was involved. It was a mechanical marvel of its time, but its reception was far from universally positive. Many critics saw the lightning rods as a gimmick, a quirky attempt to introduce manual shifting control into an automatic transmission. Even some buyers considered it to be too much of a novelty, a feature that seemed better suited for a race car or custom build than a mass-market vehicle. Many drivers were confused by the 3 shifters, unsure of how to use them correctly, and it quickly became apparent that not everyone was ready for this kind of automotive innovation. In addition to its radical transmission setup, the 1984 Hurst Olds was powered by a 307 cubic inch high-output HO V8 engine. While it wasn't as powerful as some of the other muscle cars of the era, it still offered an impressive 180 horsepower, which was respectable for a car of its size and design. The engine was mated to the unique transmission, which, when used properly, allowed the Hurst Olds to deliver surprisingly quick acceleration and performance, on par with many more traditional muscle cars of the period. The car also came with a specially tuned suspension to handle the added power, giving it a more dynamic and agile driving experience than most of its contemporaries. The styling of the Hurst Olds was bold and distinctive, with 2-tone black and gold paint, a signature Hurst stripe down the side, and unique gold Hurst wheels. The exterior screamed performance, while the interior matched its race-inspired character with sporty bucket seats, a special Hurst steering wheel, and, of course, those 3 distinctive shifters on the center console. Despite its wild styling and unique transmission setup, the Hurst Olds was ultimately a short-lived experiment. Only about 3,500 units were built, making it a rare car today and a sought-after collector's item. It was a vehicle that didn't quite fit in with the mainstream, and its experimental features likely led to its quick disappearance from the market. The idea of introducing a triple shifter setup into a luxury coupe was ahead of its time, but also difficult for most drivers to embrace. The novelty of the system wore off, and GM discontinued the Hurst Olds after just 1 model year. In hindsight, however, the 1984 Hurst Olds stands as one of the more daring and experimental cars of the 1980s, a car that combined performance with eccentricity. While the lightning rod shifters were often written off as a joke by many, they were, in fact, an innovative and ambitious attempt to bring more control and excitement into the world of automatic transmissions. The Hurst Olds may not have become a classic in the traditional sense, but it certainly earned a place in automotive history as one of the boldest and most memorable performance cars of its era. For those who were fortunate enough to drive one, and those who still own them, it remains a unique piece of muscle car history.